where champions rise, pushing limits in the oval till we touch the sky. So here's to the racers, the Oval League's pride. Through every twist and turn we ride or die. In the Grind Cup Series we find who we are, chasing glory and victory beneath the virtual stars. Racing in the Grind Cup, we're burning the turns. Follow wide open, feel the engines churn. It's the heart of the league where champions rise, pushing limits in the oval till we touch the skies. Racing in the Grind Cup, we're legends of me. The ESports Oval League driving the arcade. Racing in the Grind Cup, we're legends of me. The ESports Oval League driving the arcade. Under the lights, engines roar, we're ready to go. The ESports Oval League with the best race to show. Grinding gears, chasing dreams on the virtual track. No looking in the rear view, there's no turning back. Every lap it's a battle, every corner's a fight. Precision in the daytime, adrenaline at night. The Grind Cup Series, championship and mission. The goal we all crave, speed and skill define the legends we raise. Racing in the Grind Cup, we're burning the turns. Follow wide open, feel the engines churn. It's the heart of the league where champions rise, pushing limits in the oval till we touch the sky. From the green flag to checkered, it's a razor thin edge, pushing harder with each second, living on the ledge, drafting on the straightaway, bumper to bumper. A split second mistake and you're going under. Pit stop.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to the hallowed banks of the Daytona International Speedway as we continue Speed Weeks in the 2025 season for the ESports Online League. Here this evening, we're running for the pole for the season opener at Daytona. Front row will also be determined. The rest of the field's going to be determined in the Daytona duels next weekend. Here this evening, it's all about holding it wide open and holding a pretty wheel. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Scott Rankin. And Scott, sounds simple, right? Just get a good launch, just run the perfect line. There's nothing else to worry about, right?
Well, you've also got to build up momentum. You're not going to be cracking it when you come to the finish line to start that first flying lap. So you need to warm yourself up a little bit. That means you've got to nail not only the out lap, you've got to nail running around the top. It's, when you look at Daytona and you look at qualifying on the surface, it looks very, very simple. But there's generally somebody will figure out how to cheese it a little bit better than others. Recently, I was actually trying to help a buddy qualify into the collegiate series for Daytona last year, and we spent hours watching along and looking at a whole bunch of different replays just to see where the cheese was. But there are cheese scenarios out there, and that's part of Daytona. The big one to remember, though, no running below the yellow line during qualifying here this week. And the best part is, with all eyes on one car at a time, we know that we'll be watching. Race control will be watching, everyone will be watching. There's all the pressure on. It's a little bit more difficult out there and running on your own, particularly when everyone's sitting on pit lane and watching you.
Looking at the first car out on track, that's Alex Little in the number 69 machine, that Burger King throwback livery. And I believe these drivers are going to have two official timed laps. He just took the green flag to start. They'll have an up-to-speed lap, and then they will have one lap to be able to try and gain a little bit more speed, and then I think we'll see when he comes around here to the stripe, he'll have those left sides right down on the yellow line. You touched on it there, Scott, though. You can't have them below the yellow line, but you can have them on the yellow line, and the double yellow line actually shows a transition between the apron and the racing surface. You get down too low, it's going to get your car a little loose. Oh, looks like it's actually a one lap and done here. You get a warm-up lap and then a money lap, and he wasn't really down hooking on that yellow line. And a driver that's actually going to be taking time as well a little bit later on in the session, joining us up here in the booth as well, that being Tom Bourne. And Tom, I mean, is there anything that, obviously all these drivers here that are going to be a little bit further down in the queue, they're watching the lap times, the lines that the other drivers ahead of them are taking. Is there anything to be learned when observing here, or is it basically just your comfort in what the car is capable of doing in terms of its handling?
So,
Go ahead,
Scott. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there is a little bit, but the biggest thing, particularly with extended qualifying sessions like this, is actually making sure that you're switched on and ready to go. If you're out there and you're wandering around, which for qualifying, you don't want to be sitting there. You don't want to be focused up the entire time. Maybe you're sitting back in the chair and chilling out a little bit with friends. That's actually probably one of the better ways to go about it. But 5 or 10 minutes before your qualifying round, you sort of want to know about when you're going to be running. Head off to the loo, make sure that you get everything, get yourself set up when you sit down and fire up the car, that everything's ready to go. The big key as well, burning off just a little bit of fuel can actually help as well. So as soon as you're called out to the end of pit lane, head down to the end of pit lane, sit there, rev the engine, burn through a little bit of fuel. It's not much, but every little drop of weight in the rear end of the car does actually count.
Yeah, Scott, everything in super speedway qualifying is so crucial. You can be offline for a half an inch and it could just completely ruin your lap. Seth, going back to your point, one of the things that I have just tried to get down is just trying to be as low on the track as possible, like you said, hugging that yellow line, because being on the bottom, obviously, is the shortest way around the track. But to some people, it's not that easy. You hit that apron once, and it just completely destroys your lap. And if you do it on lap 1, okay, that's fine. You can get it back up to speed. But the second lap, that is your money lap. Like, you'll see a lot of guys first lap up against the wall, trying to get as much speed in the car as possible. You don't want to be right next to it. You want to be about half a car length off it. But then that second lap, you want to wrap the bottom as best you can and kind of just try not to scrub off as much speed as you can exiting the corners, trying to get it down to the bottom itself.
We're looking at the 77 of Patrick McQuaid, the muffler man at Chevrolet Camaro, and we got to keep an eye on this guy because he was actually the pole sitter for the season opener in the 2024 season here at Daytona, so he might be the one setting the benchmark here as well, looking for back-to-back poles at this super speedway. He is top of the board right now at a 49.911. That is going to eclipse the lap time previously put down by Eric Little at a 49.952, and right now second on the board is the 15 of Jeff Kleinsma. Did I get that right that time, Scott?
You got that one right.
There we go.
The other thing, actually, so I was just on Tom's notes, exiting the corners. Tom's got no opportunity to practice this, so if he does it, he's probably more likely to take something away from himself more than add something. Fun fact, the actual fastest way around, and the air quotes cheese, is not actually to hold the yellow line coming off the corners. You want to let the car rotate up. A couple things that does helps prevent tire scrub and washing on it. Because if you're coming through the corner and you're hugging that yellow line, you got to hang on to the wheel a little bit longer. As you come off the corner, you got to time it right as well. If you do it too early, you lose time. If you do it too late, you lose time as well. But there is a sweet spot for coming off the corner and opening the steering wheel slightly early, whereby you can carry, it's half a mile an hour worth of momentum, but that actually does matter on super speedway stuff. So there you go. And that come from hours and hours of spectating and line review, by the way.
Yeah, and Scott, just to add one thing, another key factor that you want to deal with when qualifying at super speedways is the wind. If you go If you go out with some great wind behind you, pushing you down the straightaway, you gain that extra mile an hour, and all of a sudden you're half a tenth to a full tenth up on the field, and people are like, how did he do that? Meanwhile, you could, run a semi-okay lap.
Oh, the
So
cars
just
are getting
taking a quick
faster.
look. I've got some wind information for you at the moment, Seth, by the way.
Okay.
3 kilometers an hour, so that's going to be approximately 1.5 mile an hour coming directly from the north. So that will be a direct crosswind as you come off of turn 4. It'll be a slight headwind on the run down into turn 1, and it'll be a slight crosswind sort of running left to right, sort of out a 45-degree angle down the back straightaway.
Well, mentioned about the fact that Patrick McQuaid is the defending pole sitter. He will not sit on the pole in 2 weeks' time. His lap time bested by Jeffrey Kleinsma at a 49.903, and we just saw the 48 of Austin Wheeler out on the track. He's hit now into the 49.8s. Had a 49.889 his first lap, bested that by 4,000, so he sits top of the board at a 49.885. As we look at the 62 of Christopher Reese out there, 5th of the 5 cars that took time on the first lap. Let's see if he improves here on the second lap. And he will. He will improve to third at a 49.910, 1,000th over Patrick McQuaid.
It'd be really interesting to keep an eye on how these times develop at the moment as well. Session's locked in, 3:45 p.m. Sunday. So, session's locked in terms of what the times are. You're not going to see that wind change or swing around at any point. And it's Sunday the 15th of May, so that's the default date, Punch and I Racing, which, I'm totally fine with. Whatever you want to choose for the date. Doesn't affect me none, because I don't have to drive it, Tom.
Yeah, it's the time of day and all that. With it being locked in right now, it's definitely on an even playing field. But if you ended up going out when with nothing, like everything changing, it's just completely different. I'm watching the cars on track right now, and I'm kind of intrigued to see if the 27 runs a little bit of a faster lap than everybody else, because he's not close enough to get dragged from a car in front of him, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on the standing sheet.
Now, to answer your question, he is currently slotted in 6th at a 49.934. Matter of fact, I believe there's a tie right now between him and the car we're looking at, Chris Hubka, who also clocked in at a 49.934. He's coming around for his second lap. There's the 27 up on the top of your screen coming to pit road. We also have the 38 of Dylan McDonald out there on the racetrack. They're kind of doing rapid fire qualifying here. Once the driver takes the green to begin their first lap, the second car on pit road rolls out. We've got a ton of drivers that are lined up in this queue ready to go out there, so they're trying to get them out there in a pretty speedy fashion. Here's the 38 of McDonald putting down his first lap, and looks like it's going to be a 50.363 that currently has him the slowest of the 8 they've taken time. Hubka, when he completed his lap, he is currently 5th in the 5 car.
Yeah, and Seth, that wouldn't be something I wouldn't worry about too much on the first lap. You're going to see throughout qualifying, as you guys know, being up against the wall, try and get as much speed as possible for that second lap, because like I said, second lap's the golden lap, and you got to nail it to be fast.
Yeah, it's all about the setup, though, isn't it? You can't just go out there and nail it first lap. So setup lap, look, it's definitely the less pressure, the less intense of the two, but at the same time, you got kind of no room for error either. In the fact that, if you overheat the tires, if you scrub the tires a little bit, you make a mistake, particularly in the second half of the lap, that will actually cost you on the flying lap. But yeah, this is all about precision. One of the biggest thing that you actually see for a bunch of these guys is actually tire scrub. Tire scrub's actually one of the biggest contributors to what a Daytona lap looks like. What are we talking about in terms of tire scrub? Well, when you add steering wheel input, that is going to push the tire across the surface of the track. If you've got more input on the steering wheel than the tire is providing you in sort of turning grip, what happens is, think about taking sandpaper, right, and rubbing it across your hand. Kind of the similar. You haven't got the tire sort of as straight to the road as you possibly can. It's scrubbing across. It's wiping off speed. Any friction, when you rub your hand across that piece of sandpaper. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to go home and rub their hand across a piece of sandpaper, by the way. But you feel that little bit of resistance, that lack of wanting to move. You've got to put a little bit more force in before you can get your hand to run across. That happens in the tire of a race car, and it does cost you speed. It does cost you a significant amount of speed as well. So, it's all all of these little things, and sim racing takes all of these little things and makes them so much more intense, because the difference between the real world race cars, there's little build differences in them, there's little chassis differences in them, there's fractional differences across the cars. In the sim, we don't have any of that. It's all the same shell. And yeah, you just run in, you jump in, no matter what you're in, Toyota, Ford, or Chevy, you're going to be in the same shell of the car, and the way they all handle is identical to the shell.
Riding on board with the Dale Sr. Nilla Wafers throwback, that being Johnny Williams. And you talked about don't be deceived by the first lap. How about the 38 of Dylan McDonald, slowest of the 8 on the first lap, but top of the board in the second lap by 0.003. He's currently got the pole, and Clifford Corvo also with a great qualifying effort, 4th on the board for him. 3 car is going to slot in 7th here on the first lap for Johnny Williams.
A big thing about Johnny is he's new to this field here is that he's really getting a trial by fire. He's just about brand new to the sim. You know, it's a difficult. I mean, the difficult part about all of this is that one of the things I noted last week, he was struggling a little bit with holding the lane, with reading bits and pieces, and you know, when you're new to a sim, you kind of got to jump in, trial by fire, learn all these things by making mistakes, man. You cannot jump into the sim, expect to be Max Verstappen straight away. That just doesn't happen. If you are Max Verstappen straight away, it's because you're Max Verstappen.
Exactly.
You've got the real world experience behind you to be able to do that. There are a lot of drivers that can do that, but on the other side, there's also real world drivers that jump in the sim. They just don't like it. They're all at sea. They can't feel everything properly. So, for him, it's going to be a difficult season. But the biggest thing is sit down, learn each and every week. And the biggest thing that I noticed, if Johnny Williams is listening along. Number one, slow your inputs down. You have no idea how many drivers soar on that wheel quite aggressively. It's one of the worst things that you can possibly do. Slow it down, be smooth. Tom, it's one of the things you're always talking about in the middle of a race, isn't it? Working on making sure you're not soaring on that wheel is a big help.
Yeah, sawing on the wheel, especially really anywhere. I mean, you can kind of get away with it on road courses and short tracks, but at speedways and super speedways where you want to actually have a lot of speed, sawing at the wheel is just going to end up having that tire scrub on the racetrack. It's going to heat up your tires. It's going to wear them out. And ultimately, you're going to be slower from it because, like you said earlier, Scott, the friction and everything like that, it's just going to bog your car down. And these cars are so aerodynamic, and you just want to keep as much speed as you can. Obviously, we're all racing. You want to be faster than everybody else. You just any little thing that you don't have to do, don't do it.
Top of the board for Jeffrey Vickery. Great effort there for him as he clocks in at a 49.874. We're now looking at Alonzo King in the 80, and obviously there's a difference level of experience in super speedway racing and super speedway qualifying, but it kind of seems like he had the 48 at the top of the board, then a couple cars later the 38, then a couple cars later the 21. Is the track getting faster? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, look, I mean, some rubber can get laid down as the session certainly progresses. One of the things about setting a fixed session like this is that the air temperature, the track temperature shouldn't change. But what can actually happen from the track temperature perspective is basically as the tires are rolling along, we're talking about friction and everything beforehand. It does actually add a little bit of heat into the track surface. Does accept it from the cars. So occasionally you can get minor adjustments. From the readings that I've got sitting here, I'm not seeing anything. I just feel like this is maybe just a touch of skill. We're not seeing a huge skill difference, but there are little bits and pieces. Some guys are just super speedway masters. I could never figure it out. Man, look, the guys that are running 2/10 of a second a lap faster than me always confuse me, Tom. I don't know about you.
So, first off, yeah, I completely agree. I feel like I can put down a flyer of a lap and I end up in 33rd. Like, that literally happened to me on Monday. But something you mentioned about it being a fixed session, yes, rubber is being laid down. Usually at super speedways, tires don't wear very much, especially with the next gen car. Tires don't wear as much at all. Like, you can go an entire full-length race if you want and not change a set of tires. What I will say, with the rubber being laid down, the tire temps are staying cooler because it is keeping the heat. It's keeping the rubber on the tire more. Okay, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. In this case scenario, I personally think it's a good thing because, and yeah, it's probably a little bit of a skill, gap in some drivers, and everybody has their own skill range, and I get that. But it could, that little, I believe I'm the second to last car to go out, so my tires might be just a degree or two cooler than the guy that went out first, because there's there's less rubber than what I go out on. So that 1-2 degree might make a difference. It might not. Who knows?
We just saw the 25 of Rylan Facinato in the Pepsi Chevrolet clock in 4th on the board. We're now looking at the AT&T Dark Horse Mustang number 12 of Sean Lauder. A couple of drivers out there right now on their up-to-speed laps, including Dalton McKenney, who we saw making a lot of bold moves in the shootout last Wednesday night. And we got to remember, too, while drivers may not necessarily lock themselves on the front row tonight, what they also kind of have on the line is their starting positions in next week's Daytona duels. The higher up you are on the speed charts, the better your starting grid position will be next Wednesday night in whichever duel you end up being in. We normally say track position isn't all that important at a place like Daytona or any other super speedway, but when it comes to the fact that, you know, there is the possibility we could end up having drivers not make the field, I think probably in those dual races where it's going to be smaller fields, you might actually want to start further up at the front, not be back there mid-pack rear of the field where the desperation's kind of going to set in the driver mentality.
Yeah, look, duels is a little bit of a different picture. You know, big part of that is the field's halved in size, literally half the field size. So, you know, we saw a lot of issues last week in the shootout. You've got a lot less chance for that. The other thing is, you know, when the duels fire off, is that there is a chance that you're just not in a duel with any of your buddies. So certainly getting some track position early certainly helps. Duels tend to create less cautions as well, just because of that lower car count. So, you know, it does change the mindset, the mentality. So for a duel start, you know, generally I do want to be a little bit further towards the front.
Dalton McKenney's going to clock in 4th. And just look at the intervals here, all the way down the board inside of the top 10, 37 thousandths separating 1st through 10th. And just minor things, minor mistakes are the difference between 1, 2, 3 positions, even as many as the 10 positions we see right there from Vickery down to McQuaid. You talked about the elements in terms of maybe just the right gust of wind down the back straightaway, maybe the track grip as well with the amount of rubber that's laid down, the steadiness of the wheel. There's just so many microscopic factors that play into mere thousandths of a second, which can translate into multiple positions in the final qualifying results.
Yeah, something we actually haven't talked about yet, but Tom sort of was leading towards, and I think it was probably the point he was trying to make. I don't know whether or not he had the language to it, but one of the things, we already talked about tire scrub, but rolling resistance is another big factor. So rolling resistance is basically the tires sort of have a little bit of a resistance to moving. Now, it's sort of an inverse correlation to the amount of grip that they're actually providing. So as a tire heats up, gets a little bit softer, it flexes into the road, but the tire moving around like that actually takes energy away from the car going forward. So a colder tire has less rolling resistance, but it has less grip as well. So because effectively a colder tire is a harder tire, it doesn't flex anywhere near as much. That allows you to get that energy going. So that's what we're actually talking about in terms of the rubber amount that's going laid down. So there is, you know, you might say a little bit of luck factor in that. You know, you're largely in control of the amount of RNG. Now, if we're at a track whereby we were grip limited, you actually want that rolling resistance. You're not worried about that. You're trying to get some heat into the tire. Because that's going to give you more grip when that tire can flex and mold itself to the track better. More direct surface of the tire pressing into the ground will give you more grip. So that's one of the little factors. So when we talk about, you know, when Tom was saying, hey, you know, you want a little bit of a cooler tire, you do. It's not from a grip perspective. You've got nothing. The cooler tire here isn't about grip. It's literally about preventing friction into the surface here, because the cars have so much downforce and the horsepower is not enough to exceed the amount of grip that the tire actually has available. You very, very rarely slip a tire here at Daytona. So yeah, that's one of the little secrets, and it's actually IndyCar that taught me more about that one than NASCAR, because you can definitely feel the slight speed increase on a colder tire in an IndyCar. Can't really feel it in NASCAR, but it is definitely there.
How about that lap time from Alan Dobbs? We saw him get the pole for the shootout in nighttime conditions last week here at Daytona. Daytime conditions, no different. 26 hundredths up on Jeffrey Vickery to be top of the board at a 49.847. I think he likes this track.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing about running, I actually ran a couple preseason races with all the guys in here, and Dobbs is quick, very, very quick, very consistent as well. He's not brilliant on the long-term run on the tire, so one of the things is he's probably scrubbing the tire a little bit, the way that he applies those sorts of things, but that doesn't matter at Daytona. There's no tire fall off, so not one of the things you're certainly thinking about here. But yeah, he's certainly, if you're talking about short-run pace, Dobbs is one of the guys I'll be looking at for right throughout the season.
Chris Otto with a great lap time, 49.880. We'll put him third. And we're looking now at the 14 of Christian Ruse. 19 drivers have taken time up to this point, and we've still got at least a dozen waiting in the wings to go out there and put down a lap time. Including one driver I'm going to be very curious to keep an eye on here, because if there's someone that might have a shot at toppling Dobbs for that pole position, might want to look in the direction of last week's shootout winner, that being DJ Daniels. He's another driver that very much so likes this super speedway. He is the defending winner of the season opener here at Daytona back in 2024, and he rolled off the grid in that race in the third position. So he's another guy that seems pretty good at not only qualifying at the front, but staying at the front. And we saw that case in point as he and a couple of Toyota teammates pretty much dominated the second half of the shootout last week.
Yeah, they got a lot of opportunities last week. I mean, the big thing was that it was never enough time for a run to build up to bother them, and that was the big key. We may actually see that when we get to the season opener. As well late in the race. The problem is triggering that first caution. With about 10 to go, if you see a caution anytime about there, it's going to set that up. But if you don't see that first caution, then all of a sudden it takes away that ability to control the race. They did sort of see themselves into a really nice position, but it's going to come back to strategy. All the drivers, when we're talking about Daytona, it's targeting your final pit stop. It's connecting the dots from there. And what you're doing from there is basically going, okay, well, what's the maximum range that I can run on fuel? You subtract that from your lap count. That's the number that you're targeting, and then from there you keep subtracting back to find where your stints land. And the critical lap numbers. When we talk about critical lap numbers, that's what we're working with. Is if the fuel run distance is 30 laps, we go, okay, end of the race back 30 laps. That's our critical lap number. We must hit this lap number. Anytime after this point, we can pit if we find an opportunistic pack. That's what we're looking for. And again, you step one stop further back. If it's not inside of those windows, you're generally going to want to prioritize track position. So that'll be something to keep in the mind as we head into the duels and everything next week.
We're playing musical chairs up in our top 5 right now. Christian Ruse was up to second with a 49.870. That got eclipsed by the 49.856 courtesy of John Fike. And now, top of the board, Kyle Holden at a 49.844. So a trio of very speedy race cars here in the middle portion of this qualifying session. Right now, 59 would be the pole sitter.
Yeah, so they're just continuing to find some speed. So it just looks like this session is just getting faster and faster and faster. That rubber is certainly getting laid down. And I think we're starting to get to the end of the qualifying session here as well. I think we've only got one more car to hit the track.
20 of Noah Jackson. Currently on the back straightaway. We've also got DJ Daniels out there on the racetrack. Mitch will be keeping an eye on that 96. DJ just clocked in. Oh, we've got a tie! 49.844. At least to the 1,000th we have a tie. The 10,000th gives the advantage to the 59 car. How about that?
Yeah, 10,000ths of a second. There was a couple spots earlier on in the run as well. I'm looking at Jeff Kleinsma and Clifford Corriveau, where they're separated by 1,000th of a second, potentially a 10,000th. Ryan Fascinato and Alonso King, they're separated by down to the 10,000ths of a second. So qualifying is extremely tight at this point in time, and you've got to nail it. And this is the big guns. We're now down into the big section of qualifying. You got to lay those laps down. And mistakes now? Well, you're going to find yourself deep in the field in terms of the duels. Seth, when it comes to Daytona, I either want to be at the front or the back. I do not want to be anywhere in the middle.
And there's no improvement there for DJ Daniels. Don't expect to see any improvement really on the second lap. The money lap, the fast lap's going to be the first one. As Noah Jackson coming around to complete his first lap. Let's see where he will slot in. And he's going to jump up to 5th place at a 49.861.
So it's those front 2 slots who are picking up your pole and jumping straight through. Skipping out on the duels. So basically, you pretty much want to be in the next 4, right? 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. That puts you on the front row for the duels. And that's kind of where you really want to stay. So those are the lap times I'm targeting. If I can't get that pole position, I'm looking for the next row sort of spots. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th is what I'm trying to target. So right now, those targeted lap times, we're looking for all the way back to Christian Ruse and an 8.70. So you got to beat an 8.70 to be right at the pointy end.
Looking at the 13 of CJ Papa, our broadcast colleague Tom Bourne, also out there on the racetrack right now, getting up to speed. And I was just looking at our current top 10. Remember last week it was a clean podium sweep in race conditions for the Toyotas. However, only 2 Toyota appearances in the top 10 right now. The rest of the top 10 is comprised of the Chevy Bowties.
So phenomenal job by the Chevys at the moment. But you're right, those Toyotas have been super quick. They're sitting atop the timing sheets right now. So, the difficulty is just making sure that you're in the right part of the session, make sure that you get out there, make sure you get a lap in. The worst possible thing is don't get the lap together. So, but hey, look, nice and simple. Get your head down, do what you got to do. Those are the big keys.
Coming out of turn 4 for CJ Papa. He was the slowest of the 24 drivers that took time on the first lap. Let's see if he kind of pulls off what we saw McDonald do and be faster on the second lap. And indeed, he shoots up to top 5, 5th at a 49.860. It's odd, right? Because different drivers are seeming to have different mentalities on what their fastest lap's going to be. The general consensus has been the fastest lap's going to be that first lap, but there have been a couple of outlying few that have actually clocked in faster on their second lap. And I don't know necessarily what it is they do different. Maybe they end up running the middle to high groove on the first money lap and then go down to the bottom of the second lap there. I'm not exactly sure what the approach is, but it seems to work on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think you're targeting that. So we're talking about that rolling resistance. Colder tires on that first lap, that means less rolling resistance, right? So that's what they're attempting to achieve by doing it on the first lap. And you're right, you can't nail it, but you've got less momentum to start the lap, and the tire sort of comes in and heats up as the lap sort of continues on. So you're sort of fighting the difference between momentum and the difference between that rolling resistance. So pick your poison. One of them's, it's just pretty much take your pick. I've generally preferred to go for the second lap myself, but both laps are definitely good enough. It's just, it tends to be a little bit either way, so it's difficult to call.
Well, we saw the Dale Sr. throwback earlier of Johnny Williams. About the Dale Jr. throwback here with Patrick McClendon, and you see that neon green driver banner and spoiler. He's one of 6 drivers. They'll be participating in the Dash for Cash in 2 weeks' time when we officially start the season here at Daytona. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye on. Going to be a total of, I believe it's 5 events during the course of the season where there'll be the Dash for Cash. And how about a wild card track like a super speedway for the first one, as McClendon will clock in 15th on the board of the 25 that have currently taken time.
Yeah, I don't like it. Look, I'm going to be honest, I hate super speedways. Really, they're just one of those tracks that really grab my goat because you're relying so much on other people. I hate putting my luck in other people's hands, I want to be completely in control of my own destiny, and super speedways have always, made me nervous. So, yeah, look, if I'm going to run a Dash for Cash, I want to do it on my a track where I know that I can do good. And look, some people can hack it. I'm not one of those ones that can hack it. So best of luck to all the drivers that are taking on the Super Speedway package.
You talk about controlling your own destiny. I mean, you could be running, very safely in a single file line. Something happens up at the front. Next thing you know, you're all torn up with no fault of your own. So yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Talladega, the other Super Speedway, is going to be hosting a Dash for Cash race as well. As we look at Brandon Cooper in the 54. He's going to climb up to 7th place at a 49.865, so he'll be another of the Toyotas to break up into the top 10. He had a good run in the shootout last week as well. As you see the time starting to wane down here, under half an hour left in this qualifying session, and 31 of Matt Mettler, who I don't know. I lost count last week how many times he went up and brushed the wall. He kept getting forced up to the outside line in 3-wide situations. I think he's going to be very happy to run right down here on the yellow line here this afternoon.
I do wonder whether or not next week he's going to be thinking, I learned my lesson. I'm not going to be moving up to that middle groove and force into the high groove anymore. But, that's the big key. Some fields you can do it, some fields you can't. So, it's learning, okay, what can't I do with what I've got and the opportunities that I've got around me. And if he sits down and he has a look, that's the big thing I like about car racing, is that there's always an opportunity to find something for yourself to improve on. Well, I say that about 90% of the time there's something for you to find yourself to improve on. So, and as a race car driver, one of the biggest things that I always say, and this is one of the things I say to everyone, is if you're focused on the result of a race, you're going to be disappointed very, very often. If you're focused on what you can improve on and making sure that you're improving each and every week, you can never really be disappointed. You're always under control of your own destiny. And that's the big thing to focus on.
Riding on board with the Lego Ford Mustang 99 of Austin Cooper, and let's keep an eye on that red piece of tape right there in the center of the steering wheel, because that is the key. The steadier you hold the race car, the more speed it's going to have. A lot more movement. Those rear tires are going to slide. It's going to scrub off speed. You talked about letting the car kind of do what it wants to, let it swing out a little bit here on the back straightaway. Looks like he did it a little bit, but for the most part, keeping it right down there on the double yellow line.
Yeah, you want to just, that's the pretty thing about the wheel, right? Is that as minimal wheel input as you can. Whenever I jump into a super speedway race, it's just one of the things that I do. I slow that wheel ratio down as much as I possibly can. What that does from a driving perspective is it means that the smoother that I am, it gets magnified, really. If I'm running a higher speed ratio and I'm nice and smooth, and I run a lower speed ratio, well, the tiny micro adjustments. Look at the movement in the wheel. There is just minor little movements of that wheel. It slows every little input down. When you need a lap of 2.5 miles, where you're out there, and the only difference between you and every other driver is where you're running and how much scrub you're doing. That's one of those advantages. One of the bigger things, though, that it certainly helps with in terms of race trim is that we were talking about how much the lines were moving around last week. Well, if you can trim that wheel down, you're not moving it around anywhere near as much, that means that you're not bobbling in and out of the lane. Some drivers like a faster ratio, and the reasons for that is that when they see a gap, they can move a lot quicker, and the car is definitely more responsive, but look, I'm always one for a slower steering ratio. No matter what I'm doing, I tend to go that way.
There's Tom Bourne in the 16 out there on the racetrack. Looks like for the moment, he's the last driver scheduled to take time of the drivers currently in the session. Austin Cooper did improve on his second lap, and he is 8th on the board. We saw the 31 of Matt Mettler. He's currently 22nd on the speed charts, and Tom Bourne coming in with a 50.329 his first lap. Looks like he's one of those in the camp of having the money lap be on the second lap. Let's see what kind of improvement we're going to have as he's hugging it right down there as close as he can to that yellow line through 1 and 2.
Yeah, and then he'll breathe. See how he's let the car breathe a little bit off the corner? That's what I'm talking about. Not hugging that yellow line down the back straight away. You let the car just come out a little bit, and then it's the same thing down here. You want to load the car up, get back down to that apron. So it's probably, he's a wheel track off that yellow line. But that is important because, a wheel track, particularly around a big oval like this, is its feet when you get to the end of the corner. It's multiple feet when you get to the end of the corner, distance that the car has to run. Now, if you've got the power to run that, you've got the extra speed, which is what we see when we go to the bigger ovals, the crossover style moves, that you can use that outside lane to generate the momentum. You can do something with it. Daytona, you can't. So it's about minimizing that. I think Tom will take a look at that lap and go, look, it's close, but there's definitely stuff I could have worked on there.
He'll jump to 8th position, clocking in at a 49.866. So up and solidly inside of the top 10. Looks like for the time being, nobody else going to be out there taking time, as we still got a little over 20 minutes in the session. But right now, Kyle Holden and DJ Daniels at the top of the board. Mentioned about the mass of Chevrolets that were up inside of the top 10, but right now, Toyotas have a stranglehold on the front row, and these are two drivers that we saw in that photo finish last week. Half a car length was the difference. Daniels over Holden for the shootout checkered flag.
Yeah, and confirmations just come through as well, Seth. That's the end of qualifying. So those results that are on the board, that is it. That's everything. That's done. That's exactly how they're going to tee up going in. And you mentioned it, 2 Toyotas, top of the timesheet. So they've stuck themselves up there, being quick, being consistent. It's a phenomenal job by them.
How about that? Great job for those drivers. They've apparently got some very fast machines, may have been the same machines they ran in the shootout last Wednesday night, and now they'll be able to relax next week when we have our Daytona duels here to set the rest of the starting lineup for the season opener. With that being said, that this is the end of said session, we'll take a look at the results from this qualifying session. And look at that, down to 1,000th of a second from first to second place. Alan Dobbs just 4,000ths off of the pole. John Fike there as well with CJ Papa up inside of the top 5. Noah Jackson, Brandon Cooper, a couple of Chevrolets, I believe 2 Fords with CJ Papa, Austin Cooper. Actually make it 3 Fords, add, 2 Fords, I'm sorry, with Cooper and Papa. And then add in the rest of the Chevrolets there with Tom Bourne and Christian Ruse. And of course, I believe, I'm not 100% certain, I'll have to wait to get confirmation, but I believe that both Holden and DJ Daniels will have to start on the pole position for their respective duels, but I would assume they've got the option that they can either be out there and just have some fun racing, or they could maybe pull off early and just call it an early night because their front row positions are all locked up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'd be doing. Take it out. The other option is, if you're available next week, it now means that you sit down and you help out your teammates. You become a spotter for them, and that extra person in the race that can read the race, that can see the things. One of the big difficulties you get as a driver, Seth, you just can't read. You can't see everything that's going on. You can only sort of see what's in your windscreen and out your rearview mirror. So if there's something happening further back that you're not aware of, there's a car bobbling. Remember how close the cars get. So just having the opportunity to have a spotter in. Who knows? Next week they may not have even been available to come and run the duels. So, qualifying your way in means that this could have been a critical result for them. We're not 100% certain on that, but they locked themselves in on that front row. That is it's paramount to getting your race off on the right foot. Less can go wrong when everything's in your rear view.
Absolutely. Well, let's see if we can get a hold. Let's have a little DDRT team meeting here. Let's see if we can get a hold of both the teammates that are going to be sharing the front row in 2 weeks' time, and see if we can talk with both Kyle Holden and DJ Daniel here at the same time. Kyle and DJ, you got Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got a copy?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Yes, sir. What's up?
Well, first I'll start with you here, Kyle. You came up just short in the checkered flag last Wednesday night. You edge out your teammate by 1,000th here for the pole position. Is there a sense for a driver in knowing that it's going to be a good lap, or do you not even really think about that, just hit your marks, and then after you cross the line, you take a look and see just how good it was?
Honestly, I think it's better to just the focus. That's what I was doing. I was focused on keeping the car as straight as possible and not moving the wheel. And when I crossed the line, I was like, it's probably just a 6 or something. But I heard P1, and I was like, wait a second. And I saw a 4, and I was like, no way. There ain't no way. I was never running 4s throughout the entire week of practice. So it was pretty wild to run that 4 there.
DJ, we talked about the fact when you were out there on the racetrack, you seem to like this particular venue very, very much. We saw you obviously get the win last week. You're also a former winner at this racetrack with the season opener in 2024, and you started that race from the 3rd position. Anything from that qualifying session that you were able to lean on in this qualifying session here tonight?
It is totally different from how it used to be. That's all I'm gonna say. I've pulled a lot of these, but man, these cars are so much different. It's just, you can't touch the steering wheel at all. You have to have so much finesse. It's insane.
Now, boys, the big thing is, we talked about it last week with you guys running each other down, coming to the flag. But he's leading things off when we get into the first round of the season here. Surely, Kyle, you go, hey man, I put the pole lap down. Your turn. You follow me this week, right? Surely you're in charge.
Maybe, maybe not. I'm more of a pusher, so I like pushing a lot, and I think it helps me kind of control what line I'm in, and maybe helps to control the field a little bit. So I'll probably be pushing DJ a little bit, but I don't know if we're gonna maybe drop back and save some fuel because it's gonna be a long run.
DJ, I mean, he wants to push you. You won't complain about that. Hey, I'll take the free spot. Move myself one step forward. You thinking about fuel saving already? DJ, we still got you there.
Oh, I thought you were talking to Kyle. My bad. Oh yeah, I mean, when you're in the lead at these racetracks, these super speedways, you burn so much more fuel. I mean, you end up a lap and a half shorter than everybody else, and you're just on an island from that point, unless you have a lot of teammates that are on the same page.
All right. Thank you very much for all the help, boys. Good luck in a couple weeks' time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So that's going to bring our coverage here of qualifying to a close. We've still got the rest of the field to put together, and that will be next Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got our Daytona duels. The drivers that qualified in the even numbers here tonight, they will be in the first duel. The drivers that qualified correction, let me rephrase that. The drivers in the odd numbers actually will be in the first duel. The drivers in the even numbers will be in the second duels. Third place on back will all be determined in the finishing results of those respective duels, but front row is locked up. Kyle Holden with the pole position, and his teammate DJ Daniels will share that front row. We talked post-race last week, Scott, about drivers putting emphasis on qualifying, wanting that good starting track position, and one of the words that we heard both DJ and Kyle allude to here tonight is control. They want control of that race. They want to be able to control where the runs are, where the lines are. Obviously, this seemed to be the agenda coming in. Put down those lap times that are going to have them worry-free for next week, that they're going to be having the good starting track position, and then when the green flag drops in 2 weeks' time and the points are on the line, potential playoff positions are on the line, ultimately a championship further on down the road is down the line. They want to have that momentum right from the get-go.
Yeah, it's just like you said, control your own destiny. That's the biggest, talking point for me, is that when I'm in control of my own destiny, I tend to do a lot better. I cannot get caught up in somebody else's race. I cannot get caught up in that. But it also gives you options in terms of the strategy, and that's what they're sort of setting themselves up to do, and that's what the conversation's already looking like. So it's set yourself up, give yourself all the opportunity, all the keys to success that you possibly can. That'll be the big story.
I think he's made his way back up here from the racetrack to the booth. Let's check in with Tom Bourne. Tom, you clock in 8th position. We just talked here moments ago with the front row and their agenda going forward. You're going to be participating in the duels right now, slotted to roll off inside the top 10, but that could improve or it can actually drop you further in the order depending on the circumstances in what I believe is going to be the second duel based off of the even qualifying number you were in. Have you got a strategy right now in preparation for that duel, or do you kind of have to take a look around, you see what drivers you're going to be with in preparation for your upcoming duel race?
Well, first off, it wasn't the lap I wanted. I nicked the apron just a smidge in turn one, and I felt like I'd cost myself a 100th there. But overall, yeah, it's hard to say sometimes. I've raced with these guys before. A lot of familiar faces. I kind of know how they race. A lot of some of them I've never raced with. But we had good speed in the shootout, which I was pleasantly surprised with. The team worked really well. I know I got Christian Ruse in my duel for a fact. So I've got at least one team car with me. So hopefully we can make something happen. But like you guys were alluding to, staying out of trouble. It could hinder you. It could hurt you in the duels. You never really know. Personally, I think the duels are kind of whatever at that point. They're not paying out any points. It's a long race in the season opener, so you got a lot of time to make up. But overall, I don't really mind if I end up crashing going for the win in Duel 2, and ultimately I don't really mind winning Duel 2, if that makes a lot of sense.
you talk about, really not a whole lot on the line in the dual races. You're going to make the field regardless. You also talked about having a teammate there, but if circumstances pan out where you're not able to find a teammate in the closing stage of the duels, how much do you don the diplomatic uniform and try and work with other people, try and form alliances that may ultimately be somebody that you can call on late in the race when we end up points racing here at Daytona in 2 weeks?
It's definitely challenging. Thankfully I'd like to think I've made good relationships with some of the other drivers that are not on my team this year. I know me and DJ have raced together for multiple years. Kyle Holden, I met him this year when I was watching one of the recruitment races, and me and him had a conversation. And I briefly raced with him. So ultimately, if I'm trying to figure out who I can and can't work with, it's going to come down to practice. And we're going to try, I'm going to keep a mental note of who pushes me well, who can be pushed well. And I expect the other drivers to also do that. If, I can push them well, they can push me well. And just kind of towards the end of the race, if nobody's got teammates up there, you might be able to work with somebody. But if you got, say, Kyle and DJ are up there at the front of the field, you're going to kind of write them off automatically and, kind of try and find somebody else.
Well, we look forward to seeing what the official starting lineup will look like. We've established the front row, rest of the field determined next week. Hope you'll join us next Wednesday night for the 2 Daytona duels here for the ESports Oval League. That again will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we, in 2 weeks' time, get ready to go green flag racing to kick off the 2025 season here, concluding Speed Weeks from the Daytona International Speedway. We appreciate everybody tuning into our coverage here tonight. For myself, for Scott Rankin, for our driver analyst, Tom Bourne, appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. We'll see you guys next week as Speed Weeks rolls on here on FRN, the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.